Mr. David,
Hello.
welcome back.
Thank you.
First time on the podcast.
Yes, a bit nervous, but then it's the first time, so.
You're doing just fine. So what is your favorite podcast that you like to listen to?
I would say I'm not that much of a big podcast fan, but then I do listen to Lex Friedman whenever he has like a big guest on the podcast.
Nice. So you prefer long form or short form content in general?
I would say short form because of
Okay.
my attention span. I just prefer
Just
to
like
keep it
something that
really
like
short.
tuck, tuck,
Yeah.
tuck. Yeah.
I mean, is it the same for you? What's your favorite podcast apart from yours?
I think it's similar to you. It really depends on the vibe, on the topic, on the yeah, whatever. Like it's not that clear, right? It really um I mean, Lex is great for sure, especially if they're like some guests that I like to listen to. But there may be, um, oh, actually, I think my favorite podcast is probably All In podcast.
Oh, yeah. I know you've always been a big fan. I mean,
Yeah,
who's your favorite person amongst like the crew?
I think Mr. Sachs is just amazing.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to say Jason, but then.
Yeah, Jason is good. um,
Okay.
I mean, I find Jason quite. I find him really strong in terms of moderating. Um,
Yeah.
and also he does have some friends, right? Like these the Android founder,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's funny how
exactly.
he deals with his friends.
Friends.
I find it very interesting how he deals with friends in general. So I think there's quite something to be learned from that, which is good.
Exactly.
Shamath has like tremendously deep insights. The way that he actually looks at things. I guess he has an entire team that's also analyzing trends and so on.
Yeah.
Is super interesting. Did you look into his company? It's 8090. I didn't fully get what they do.
No, I've not had time to look at that. But then, I mean, most people really do not have positive things to say about Shamat, right? Everybody keeps talking about I mean, people feel he just made it because he was early on Facebook, and then with the whole with his other companies, people don't really buy into his ideas, right? I
Right.
think he was like pushing this whole Spark companies like mergers and stuff, which I think people do not really like that much. So
What is a spec? Maybe can you unpack this for to our audience roughly what it is?
I think it's like a special purpose acquisition company where you sort of like get like a publicly traded company, and then because you're not trying to go through like the whole hurdle of trying to list and do like an IPO, you buy a company already existing that is already listed on the market, and then you merge into them. So just to increase the capital share and market cap.
So in simple terms, it's just like a company that the only purpose to have is to make another company listed on the stock market, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So that's why it's called a vehicle, because it's
Yeah,
literally just like a transient company. um,
exactly.
why is that necessary in the US stock market? Is there? I guess it has some regulatory
Yeah, I think
requirement.
it's more of like the regulatory requirements, like with the SEC. Everybody is not like a big fan of the SEC, obviously, because like of the. I mean, in the
Is
previous administration, lots of regulations were more of like enforcement actions, like regulating via enforcement actions, and then like the whole process of getting listed in an IPO is like really crazy from what I've read because I've never IPO'd a company. So I guess
yet?
that's why people go through yes, yet. That's why people go through this SPAC route. But then I feel the value add for these SPAC companies are quite minimal. I feel it's just a way of grabbing market share without really providing any much value, basically.
Hmm, hmm. SEC or SEC is the Security Exchange Commission, just for our
Yeah,
audience, right?
yeah,
We're using some acronyms. I'm trying to unpack them. But okay, yeah. Um, so this regulator, this SEC, is trying to protect consumers from themselves, I guess, right? So it's playing like mommy and daddy, saying yes,
Exactly.
you can invest, or no, you cannot invest
You
here.
can invest. Yeah.
Yes. Um, so you have been obviously at the forefront of AI, and so to what degree do you think can AI and AI driven document analysis in capital markets actually help people to understand um, whether to gamble or whether to invest into something or not? Like to what degree do you think that can actually help people nowadays?
I feel the current models are becoming good enough, but then I would not really trust a model to give me like invest or not, like investment advice, right? I could just consult it, but then I feel going straight and asking, should I buy Tesla stocks, for example? We're not there yet because like the information is still a bit contracted, so we don't have that much like details to feed into the AI models. I mean, if you look at it, like 12 months ago, most of these models didn't even have access to the internet. So it's basically just using like what they have in their training data to make this analysis. But then with the recent advancements, such as like the deep research model by Google, there's like a deeper research model by Grok, and also one by OpenAI now. So these models are starting to get access to external tools. So now models are able to analyze charts and stuff, and then it's now becoming more possible to get like reasonable financial advice from AI. But I feel we're still not there yet, 100%. Although I mean, there are some companies focusing on this. For example, I know of one company called Doctor, which provides like this whole AI analysis for documents to companies. Like they provide an API where you could ingest like a lot of your documents and then also do certain analysis, maybe extract the market cap for this stock, look at all the numbers for this stock, and then they try to find like red flags and stuff, which can make you, which can actually basically just help you know if you should invest or not. But I think right now we're not there 100% yet, but we're getting there. I would say 6 to 12 months would probably have like a good AI analyst, which would probably perform more than like a junior analyst at Change Street or something.
Hmm. Okay, understood. Um, yeah, I mean, how do you deal with like? I mean, I find it sometimes also a bit a stupid question, but people wonder, how do you deal with hallucinations, right? I mean, humans can be incredibly dumb. All right, they they make
Yeah.
incredibly dumb decisions sometimes. So asking how to deal with dumb decisions or statements from an LLM, which are trained on human data, is, I feel, a bit redundant. But what's your take on that?
I think the main problem here is like LLMs are trained to always provide an answer.
Hmm.
And then if you, it's
Not
like
always, right?
putting a gun. I mean, yeah, not always in the sense that you get companies now trying to make these models reject certain type of questions, right? But then like take like a freshly trained LLM, like a base model without any reinforcement learning with human feedback to try to select what is good versus what is bad, right? It tends to want to answer whatever questions you give it. And that's the problem here. Because, like, we humans, I mean, if I ask you something about maybe biology, for example, which you probably know nothing about, right? You would not be able to answer the question. I mean, not like, you know what I mean? I mean, you're a computer science expert, but then if I'm asking you certain questions in biology, you probably don't know, like, you're not a subject matter expert in that field. So you can easily say, okay, I do not know this. But then if you go to an LLM, it tends to want to have an answer to whatever questions you give to it. And that's the main problem here. I mean, if these models start getting trained to actually say no, I've never seen this before. I don't know about this. Then it starts to get better because you already know, okay. Or if there's a way to actually get these models to give you like a confidence level, saying, okay, I'm 100% certain this is the right thing, right? But then I guess it's just the whole limitations in the way the transformer models are structured because it's basically just predicting like the next likely token. And
Hmm.
then if it's predicting the next likely token, I mean, it just gets to predict what's the closest to what it had in its training data. Yeah. So I
That's
feel that's
fantastic.
why. the problem with hallucination is it's really hard. It's really hard to solve that completely. But then, I mean, you see companies now telling you, just we're starting to get different benchmarks, like hallucination benchmarks for certain models, right? Where you give it a bunch of questions and you're able to benchmark how much it hallucinates. But I feel one way we could probably tackle this hallucination problem is giving these models access to tools. For example, if you give the model access to the internet now, you could go ask, like, what's the temperature in San Francisco today? It gets to know that because it knows it could query like the web to get the temperature information, like the weather information in San Francisco. But then if you do not give it access to this and you just go and ask the model, what's the weather in San Francisco like today? It's probably just going to say something instead of saying, I do not know, or I don't have access to the current weather information. So you see the problem, right?
I was about to say, I mean, I was about to ask whether benchmarks can potentially, or are maybe insufficiently tilted towards allowing experts to actually just realize they don't know something and they shouldn't answer.
I mean, for the benchmarks, right? I mean, it's difficult to have like a benchmark that generalizes to other problems, right? Because, I mean, you could have a benchmark to detect how much an LLM hallucinates in certain fields. Maybe let's say in medicine, for example. But then medicine is like a very broad field. So you have to like niche down to like your certain use case, right? Before you're able to actually nail it. So even with the benchmark, there's still problems because this doesn't 100% solve the problems of hallucinations in LLMs.
Right. But is there any way to inform an LLM, let's say only 5% of your training data set is on medicine, hence you should not consider yourself like a medicine expert, right? Or something, or versus a model that's like trained 80% on medical data, it should be rather confident if it's the same underlying architecture, right? Is there any way to ingest this kind of data into? I guess it's mostly this could be positioned in the system prompt, but are there any other
Yeah,
ways?
I don't think there are like any straightforward ways to do that. Saying, okay, this particular data set deals with medicine, so you should focus on medicine. But then you start seeing like specialized models come up. For example, you could have like a base model that is trained on maybe web text data sets, which is like one of the most popular data sets. It's a collection of like documents from the internet for the past few years. So I mean, if you have like a base model trained on these web text data sets, definitely there are like some medical articles on the internet also parts of the data set, right?
Mm.
You could have that as a base model, but then if you want to use that model for like a certain use case in medicine, then you need specialized like data for your certain use case. So that's why we're starting to see like small models that even out to these big models on certain use cases because they are actually trained and fine-tuned for certain use case. So they perform better than like generalist models. It's like a GP doctor and like a doctor who's trained as like a surgeon for maybe like a certain use case. So yeah, I mean it's I mean the general practitioner probably knows like just surface level information about everything, right? But then for specialized cases, you have to go meet like a specialist or a consultant to help you resolve that. So it's the same for LLMs.
Nice. So I suppose regarding specialization, you are one of the forerunners in applying GPRO. Maybe you can explain also to the audience a bit what that means. But the forerunner in specializing a base model for a given task, right? Maybe you can unpack
Yeah.
that a
So
little bit.
yeah, we released the paper a couple weeks ago. So, like, first off, let me just give you like a brief overview of how these models are usually trained, right? So, you have like a huge collection of data, and then you have like the transformer architecture where you feed in like a lot of this data, and you're hoping like that your model learns the structure of this data and is able to answer questions based on this data. So, what usually happens is the normal training of these models is you feed in a lot of data and you position the models to predict the next tokens. But then after doing this, you would want to still make the model learn. I mean, there's what is called reinforcement learning with human feedback, where after the initial model is trained, like the base model is trained, you want to you want to fine tune this model more to give you answers that humans, like naively, where humans prefer over like the generic answers. So, for example, you could have a question saying, okay, what is the capital of France, for example, and then the model says the capital
Marseille.
of France is like Paris, and then you ask the same question again, and it says the capital of France is maybe Nice, for example.
Mm.
You get? So you would want to have you have like all these like the questions and the answers, and then you have a human coming to say, okay, this is the right answer. This is the answer I prefer. This is the answer I don't prefer. You get all the preferred answers by humans, and then you feed it back to the model, saying, okay, optimize for the correct answers, the answers preferred by humans. So I mean, looking at like this whole explanation now, you start to see problems with this because it's not scalable. I mean, how many you would need like a lot of humans, you need a lot of people to actually manually go in and select, okay, we prefer this answer over this answer, right? And then with GRPO, it's a new form of reinforcement learning, but then it takes out the whole human feedback aspect. So instead of using a human now to say, okay, this is the right answer or this is the wrong answer, you have like you have like a middleware in between of like a verifiable source of truth. For example, if you're asking about the capital of France now, what's the best way to know if it's the correct answer or not? I mean, you could rely on maybe Wikipedia, you could rely on like maps data, right? Or something. So in GRPO, you're basically relying on like a source of truth. So in this case, let's say you're asking what's the capital of France, then your source of truth might be to check like Wikipedia, right, and get the right answer, which you then feed back to the model. But this time, you could check Wikipedia automatically in the sense that you don't need like a human to do that check. You could write maybe like a Python code or like an API call to like Wikipedia, for example, that gives you, okay, given a question, give me the right answer for this, which you feed back to the model. So like this type of API calls where you're using like an external source of truth is known as like a reward function. So basically, whenever a model predicts like an answer, you check your source of truth. If it matches, then you give it like a reward. If it doesn't match, you don't give it any reward. So the model starts to optimize for like these right answers so it could get and maximize these rewards basically.
And there's a particularly interesting component, like the way that the model learns to get to the right solution, right? There's this unlocking somehow of the unlocking of the reasoning of the model. How does this happen? Like, what does that even mean? The unlocking of reasoning.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question properly. So you
Mhm.
said, uh-huh,
So some of the models like DeepSeek R1, they
yeah.
started to think, right? They started to have an internal dialogue, so to speak, where they say, okay, wait, now I need to question what I've just postulated. Maybe it's the other way around. So this is somehow a form of reasoning, of reflecting, of questioning yourself. How does it happen that these models are doing that? Like, I mean, because as you said, it's mostly an LLM which is based on a
Mm-hmm.
transformer model,
Mm-hmm.
just predicts the next
Yeah.
token.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just predict the next token, then at what point do you start to have these like wait or aha moments, so to speak, right, where the model starts to question itself?
Okay, I think it's similar to how like the human brain works. It's similar to how the human brain works. For example, the moment you're born, it's more like it's like a blank slate, right? And then you start to see a lot of things. For example, you go to you get put into school, you start to see like alphabets, they start teaching you, okay, this is A for apple, B for ball and stuff. And then subsequently, I mean, you start taking in all of this information, and then suddenly you see like an apple on the road, and you're like, okay, yeah, an apple starts with an A. So I guess it's like similar to how like the whole transformer architecture works. It's modeled very similar to how the human brain works. So the more it gets to see this data, then it starts to understand, okay, there's a connection between this, and then okay, I've seen this previously, and then based on this information I've seen previously, I think this might work this way. So it starts to get like this new form of like unseen knowledge. It starts to generalized problems he hasn't seen in like its training data sets.
Mm. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I've shown DeepSeek R1, I think, to my class like only I think like 5 days or 4 days after it came out in LM
Yeah.
Studio, and I think they really liked it. No? In the research and information security course, maybe you
Yeah.
remember, it was
Yeah,
like
so I think GRPO is like really wonderful. I mean, it's the most interesting thing I've seen in like machine learning so far because it
mm,
feels like magic. I mean, you start to give like these models data, and suddenly you see it's starting to generalize, and you're like, why does this work? I guess that's the question everybody keeps asking, like, why
it's
does this work? Why is there like an aha moment? Like, why did this work? So basically, it's people still trying to understand like the implication of this, but I feel it's really big, and then it just feels like pure magic.
exactly, it feels like pure magic. And so to what degree do you think this might actually transform scientific research in general?
So I think if you can model scientific research as a verifiable problem, then GRPO is probably going to work for it. But then it's hard to model scientific research as a verifiable problem, right? Because with most scientific research, you're actually trying to find answers to certain questions, or you're trying to question certain assumptions, right? So it's better you don't rely on a certain source of truth because it's not really verifiable, right? I mean, you need an answer before you're able to verify if that answer is actually correct. In the field of scientific research, I feel there's still like a long way to go. There's still a long way to go. But then with this model starting to generalize to unseen problems, I'm very sure in the next few months we'll probably start to see like models, LLMs making and finding new solutions to problems we've had in the past and stuff. So
Hmm. I feel also we often have to ask the right questions in science, and like setting up this hypothesis, right, that we want to verify or refute. And I feel
yeah,
that this is quite
exactly.
quite tricky, no, in many cases, like to ask the right questions.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite tricky.
These LLMs often they mirror somehow the person that is prompting them, right? Because the more precise and maybe interesting the question is, the more elaborate the answer can become, right? That it's kind of like a really like a mirror of the input that you get
Yeah,
as
it's
an
more of
output.
like your LLMs are as useful as the type of prompts you put into them. Yeah, because I mean that's why when you look at it, right, like most of these model providers, like the top ones, for example, they now have a way where you just put in like maybe like a naive prompt, and then he writes it to a better prompt. Because your prompts, like prompting is really important. That's why Claude has been pushing this idea of whenever you give a prompt to Claude, there's an option for it to rewrite the prompts to be better. Because I mean, humans are more straightforward. I mean, I would just ask you, for example, what's the weather in your location right now? But then an LLM will need more information. Maybe, okay, you're currently in Switzerland. Can you tell me what the weather in Switzerland is?
Mm.
So I mean, context matters. Like the prompt also matters a lot for LLMs. So
Absolutely. And speaking of Claude, they just released 3.7 Max, right?
yeah, I think for 3.7 Max, it's not like an official release from Claude. It's
Mm.
more of like Corsa, because I think Corsa is one of the biggest customers for Claude. Corsa is the popular IDE which most developers now use. So like Corsa is one of the biggest customers for Claude, but then there has been this whole drawback for the past couple of days where people are like, 3.7 on Corsa is not as effective as using 3.7 officially on cloud.ai
Oh,
platform. Yeah.
wow.
So I mean that's why I guess the founders of Corsa, like the company, decided to come up with like a new model. So basically it's still the same Corsa 3.7 with like different hyperparameters. So on Corsa 3.7 they introduced the new thinking token. So you can set the level of thinking you want, like how extensive do you want the model to think for before it provides an answer. So I guess with Corsa 3.7 Max now, um, Corsa is basically setting the thinking level to the max, which means users will have to pay more for this. I mean, the claim is for like power users. So they're saying they're releasing this for heavy users because it's quite expensive. I saw like a couple of comments about the pricing. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, Cursor has been fantastic, right, for writing code and for especially UI, from what I've seen. Right? So, I mean, you also dip your toe into the entrepreneurial journey. For example, as a founder of Ask Your PDF,
yeah,
it's one of the first, if not the first, tool to actually understand PDFs with AI, right? So, congrats on
yeah.
being so early
Thank
there.
you. Yeah, so with Axie PDF, I would say it was like an accidental find. Should I say accidental find? I
Hmm.
mean, I never set out to actually have like an AI startup initially. I was more into like crypto and then having like traditional businesses in Nigeria and also in the UK. But then I never really thought I was going to actually start a company in the AI space. I was just very curious initially. I mean, 3 years back, I was amongst the first set of people to have access to OpenAI's Codex models because I saw it on Twitter and then there was like a long wait list. And then I had to look for, I think it was GDB then, like the CTO or CEO of OpenAI. I had to send him like an email then saying, I'm a student studying cybersecurity. I saw Codex models. I'm really interested. Would it be possible to get access? And that was how I got access. And it was really interesting at that point. I was like, this is really going to change the world. And then since then, I've been like an AI fanatic to say, like, I've been really involved in the space, trying to see what are like the current trends. And then with Axie PDF, it was when I was undertaking my master's study at UCL. Actually, I was to pitch for like a thesis supervisor, and then I needed a way to impress them, right? So like I wrote an email saying, okay, I'm trying to use LLMs for detecting vulnerabilities in smart contracts. This is what I've done in the past with LLMs. I have some form of experience. And then I quickly whipped up like an MVP then. It was called Bible GPT, where you could basically using like OpenAI's GPT 3.5, you could basically just go in and ask about like a Bible verse, for example, and it gives you an answer. So I sent that to like my potential supervisors then, which you're one of them actually, and then and then I got a feedback saying, okay, yes, let's work on it, and I totally forgot about it. Like one was paper GPT, the other one was the Bible GPT. I totally forgot about it until like a few weeks later, where like you sent me a link on Twitter saying, "Is this not the idea you showed me? Like somebody's about to push it live." And then that was like the push I needed. And then it took me like 3 days to do like front end, to do back end, and then just release it live on the internet. And it became like an instant hit. It became an instant hit. Like it went viral on Twitter. And then in like the first week we had like close to 20,000 users because it was like a free service then. So that was like really cool, really, really cool. And then the other advantage we basically had was OpenAI then decided to launch like the GPT plugin store. And then we were like the first group. I think there were 5 plugins that got accepted in the first week, and we're amongst these 5 plugins. So like for a
You
long
were
while,
featured. You were featured in the
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, exactly. And then for like 2 months, we're like the biggest one on like the plugin store. So that brought us like a whole lot of users also. We decided to eventually offer the service as an API. In fact, I mean, in the first year, we never paid for like any adverts. Like the product was basically just marketing itself through like referrals and stuff. And then the same OpenAI who basically gave us like a big opportunity for the product to go really viral. At some points, like 11 months later, became like our biggest threat in the sense that they eventually added the whole Ask Your PDF feature into the ChatGPT app, which sent like the revenue tanking initially because at that point we were very much confused. Like, what do we do next? I mean, we never planned for this. We never saw this happening. And then there was like an internal joke, I mean, on Twitter then the moment you mention GPT wrapper apps, those are like apps that are used for like that basically leverage the APIs of these LLM providers. The moment you mention them, everybody says, when next are you starting your own Axia PDF app, or when are you building your own chat PDF app? I mean, on the surface, it looks like it's like a very easy problem, right? It's like easy problem. You just need to make API calls. But then when you start to see like this is actually harder than most people think, because there are a lot of parts involved in actually running a service like that. So
Yeah, I mean, when you go down the rabbit hole, there are
yeah,
always 1,000 things that you have never thought about that could actually be necessary, right? I mean, finding a needle in a haystack, which a PDF is,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
not simple. It's not simple.
So it's not
Yeah,
simple. It's
it's
not
not
simple.
simple. Yes.
Yeah.
How has your love hate relationship with the PDF document format evolved over these years?
I think the PDF document format is one of the most difficult formats to deal with because it's basically unstructured. And that's why it's still a problem until till date. It's still like a very big problem. I mean, their companies focused solely on ingesting unstructured documents like PDFs, doing millions in revenues because it's like a really hard problem to solve. Because like it's unstructured in the first place. It doesn't follow a certain structure. So first off, before you're able to ingest this information, you need to map a structure. You need to understand the structure of the document before you're able to use it for anything reasonable. So it's still a very hard problem. Still a very hard problem to solve.
And Stripe now, just a few days ago, they announced that they are now um, serving some of their API content, or I think even the documentation, just in text format, so MD style
Yeah,
files, right?
Markdown. Yeah,
Markdown
because
files.
with Markdown it's still even more structured. Markdown is actually structured because you could. I mean, it has headers in certain formats, H1 headers, H2 headers, list are in certain formats. But then with PDF, you have no structure. It's unstructured, so it's just like a text, a bunch of text. Some PDFs will have tables in them, some would have images in them. So it's like really complicated. It's really complex to actually ingest documents in PDFs.
Hmm, interesting. With the advent of multimodal models, I guess you could also like look at the PDF just from a visual perspective, technically, right? Instead of
Yes,
looking at the
yes,
binary. That I guess
yeah,
that's one approach. Yeah.
yeah. That has also improved like the quality of the service the provider acts your PDF because we switched from naive trying to extract the text. Because for example, if a PDF has an image, it has a table, and it has a bunch of text in it. If you extract just the text, then you miss the information stored on the images. And then
And
if you're
also the
trying to provide,
position, right? The
yeah,
position
exactly,
of the
positioning, yeah.
cells and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, but then with this multimodal LLMs, it's now possible, called VLMs actually. I mean, it's now possible to actually take like a picture of the PDF, like an OCR in OCR format, and then pass it to the model, and then the model is able to give you a structured format of the contents of this document. But then the
Yeah.
problem with that is it's not computationally efficient right now. I mean, because you're adding a new layer to a new layer of complexity to it. Because if you're extracting text, it's easier than you have to first convert each page to an image and then pass it to an LLM. So increases the computational complexity basically.
Mistral was boasting about having the best OCR model, no? A few days ago, I saw that. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, yes, they
Yeah.
released Mistral OCR models. But then the thing is, I've seen a couple of posts saying they were benchmark maxing, meaning they basically just released the models and made it fit to certain benchmarks. But then in actual practice, people have found it not to be as good as stated by Mistral. And I think that's the biggest problem now with most companies. Everybody's trying to maximize for these benchmarks because people get to see the benchmarks, right? But then in practice, like these models underperform the benchmarks.
Hmm.
So for example, if I was trying to create in quotes like the best OCR LLM in the market, I would probably just take like an OCR benchmark and train the model on this benchmark, right? And then whenever like you do a test, you find out, okay, I'm maximizing for the benchmarks, I'm scoring the highest on the benchmarks. But then in actual practice, it's because I trained on the benchmark data. So that's
Right.
why, yeah, it's still a big problem in the LLM space, like having proper benchmarks.
And even the benchmark may just not reflect reality, right? Some of the
Yes.
tasks that we do are just not present there.
Yeah. I mean, a very good example is with like coding models. I mean, OpenAI claimed GPT-4 was way better than Cloud Sonnet 3.5 back then. I mean, it was visible on the benchmarks that 4.0 was a better model. But then in practice, it wasn't the case because any developer you ask will tell you, I always use Cloud Sonnet for coding. So it's the same. It's the same.
Yeah, nice. So regarding coding and maybe even coding agents, right?
Yeah.
So so in the for startups now, do you think we need less people? Because and specifically maybe less software developers because of Cursor, because of Cloud Sonnet, like and how much fewer developers do you think we need? Like, what's the ratio kind of like to before? What's your view on?
Okay. I would say in practice, talking about Axopedia, for example, we had like we currently do have 4 full-time developers, right? And then initially we had plans of hiring like 3 more developers, and then at some points we introduced everybody on the team to Corsa, and then now it looks like we don't even need 4 developers anymore.
Uh-oh.
I mean, it's like it's. I mean, with this coding agents getting better day after day, I think there's like a real threat. There's a very real threat. I mean, people tend to downplay the threat, saying it's not possible that this AIs will take over developer jobs. But in practice, it's becoming very, very much possible. Very much possible. So it's for example, I'll give you like a practical use case. We hired somebody to create slides for TikTok, for one of our products. And then just 3 days after hiring, we discovered we could actually automate the process using AI. And then we used like AI in building like a solution that automatically creates the slides without human involvement. So you can see what eventually happens to who we hired. That's the real problem here. People are trying to downplay the threats, but then it's a very real threat. It's a very real threat.
Right,
I would
right.
say I would say the developers that would be mostly affected would be like the junior developers. The junior developers would be mostly affected. And then if you check the trends, it's already becoming very visible because companies are starting to hire less people. And then you can see what happened last year with like a lot of companies laying off people just to drive stock prices up. And interestingly, we've not seen any performance downtime as a result of laying off these people because AI has eventually taken off. So it's interesting. I feel in the next 6 to 12 months, these models will probably be as good as maybe like mid-level or even being conservative, I would say senior level developers.
Mm, mm. What programming tasks currently would you not want to outsource to AI? Like which ones do you think it's still like underperforming and where you really need like somebody who looks into and be
I would
deeper?
say
Yeah.
so far would be product design because most of these models are already very good at writing code, but then the product design aspect is still lagging behind because whenever you're designing products, you need to take account of like the user experience, the UI aspect also, which these models are not really that much good at right now.
Mm,
So
mm.
I would say product design. And then also database management because like a very simple bug can actually make like the AI mess up your whole database and drop an entire table and stuff. So
Happened to me. It's terrible.
yeah, so I mean, and
Yes.
also I would say maybe solutions involving I would say maybe using AI for maybe medicine, for example, it's still a bit of a gray area in that sense because, of course, it involves like the health of people and stuff. But then it would get better. It would eventually get better.
Fantastic. AI definitely has promising a promising future, right? And you to resume, right? To kind of like summarize. In your view, instead of hiring 7 people, you may only need maybe half of them, right? Roughly 3.5, something like this, like
Yeah.
Claude,
Yes. Yeah.
Claude 3.5. And definitely there are some aspects like healthcare, maybe some financial applications, maybe some deeper database tasks that are quite tricky to be outsourced, right? Or like, let's say
Yeah.
vibe coded, right? Like vibe
Exactly.
coding is where you don't even look at the code, where you just like prompt.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
prompt, and then you have the models output like an entire app for you. And then when you look at it, like if you look at the trend from last year till now, most companies we're starting to see like single man $1 million companies
Hmm.
where it's just one person doing everything with the help of AI, which wasn't possible years ago. And then most people now are trying to raise less money. Everybody's trying to just bootstrap. And then with AI now, it's becoming easier to do this. So you stay very lean. For example, Corsa was able to go to about 100 million in ARR with like a 15-person team. I guess Lovable was able to do that too with less than 10%. So when you start to see that there's this trend, everybody's trying to stay very lean now, and it's becoming way more possible due to advancement in AI and these models becoming smarter.
That's so sustainable and so strong. No, I love this kind of
Yeah,
approach. But that's actually a trend we have seen over many years, right? If you look at the S&P 500 index, the number of employees that you needed to generate a 1 million ARR has gone
yeah,
down over the last 15, 20 years, right? So that's actually not specifically to AI, but AI has been certainly a catalyst recently
yeah. I think
to
it's starting to
yeah.
accelerate this.
Yes.
Starting to accelerate this. Yeah,
Yes, yeah, which is fantastic for anyone, no, who wants to start things. Just do it. Like
just do
maybe
it.
just do it. Exactly. There's no
Exactly, just do
excuse,
it.
right? Yeah, and be consistent about it.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Yeah, cool. Is there anything you would like to add?
Nothing I can think of right now. Nothing I can think of right now. But then I feel AI is a real threat to jobs. So I think the best way to position yourself now would be to start adapting AI into whatever you're doing, so you can also stay on top of the matter or on top of the problems.
Fantastic, fantastic. Uh, Thank you, Isaac. No, was great having you. Would love to have you on anytime again. Right? I think you have a really good smell and understanding of what's happening in the space, and yeah, we were gonna link the Optimus paper, so your GPO
Yeah,
paper, in the show notes.
yeah,
And yeah, if anybody has questions to Isaac, just shoot him a message. He's Zeddy on Twitter.
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It was
Th-
nice being on your podcast. Thank you.
thank you, Isaac.
Thank you.